to another episode of Books and Beyond, our favorite book club, or at least that's what we hope and we aim to. I'm Thinka, your host. You're probably tired of me by now. And we have a great session for you today. We will be talking about bedtime stories for project managers with a very special guest, which I will introduce in just a minute. Before doing so, I just wanted to give a few intros. One of which being that yesterday we had, for the very first time, International PMO Day, which is an amazing celebration of what we do, and it's amazing that the founders of this day have given us the opportunity to celebrate it properly. And now we have the platform to do it on a yearly basis. So hopefully everybody had a great time. And of course, we look forward to hearing from you on the PMO leader. They actually had a challenge about tell us about your story and your celebration. So if anybody wants to share, certainly go ahead and do so. Another announcement that I think is important to note is that we will be having, and this is just a teaser, but as you all know, last year we had the PMO Leader had a global conference in October. And of course, we will be doing that all over again this year. Same date, 18th of October, mark it in your calendars. We will definitely come back with more details about it, but we will maintain the same follow the sun type of structure where we start in one region and then we wrap up in another region so that we cover, the whole globe because we're global. So more to come on that, but just wanted to for us to know and to have that in our mind and in our calendars for sure. If anybody is live right now, and this is a live session, so if anybody is with us, feel free to drop a hello in the chat on the right side, and let us know where you're from, how you're doing. If you have any questions throughout the discussion, if you want to take the mic, just raise your hand and I will unmute you. I said we were live. We were also live on YouTube right now. If you have any questions and you're seeing this on YouTube and you have any questions, you will need to connect to this Meets portal to ask your question. And what else? Recording. We'll have the recording of this. We're recording this session, so we'll have it available right away after the conversation is done. And you can find it. You can grab it from LinkedIn and from the PMO Leader YouTube channel. And one more thing, and then I promise that I'll go right into it. PDUs. So these events are self-reporting PDUs. So whoever, it's not just, these events are really valuable for what they are and for the insights and the lessons learned that come out of it. But we all know that we sometimes need to get past those nasty PDUs. So this is episode number 15. If you haven't watched any of the previous episodes, you can just go ahead on a YouTube channel, for example, check them all out, and then you can self-report 15 hours of PDUs or how many, depending on how many you've seen so far, which is actually a pretty good amount. I'm not very familiar with the requirements, but I know some people are really looking for that. Anyway, that's pretty much it. I'm done with housekeeping. I'm done with the boring rules. Now it's time to introduce Marisa Silva, who is our guest today, and who we have been looking forward to bringing on this show, at least on my end, for so long. And I'm happy that she is with us today. Marisa, thank you for joining. And I'll leave it up to you if you'd like to say a few words just for a bit of introduction. I don't want to take that from you.
Thank you. Well, my first words is to thank you, Ilinka. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm passionate about books, as you probably realized already from my background. So the fact that we are talking about books, and in particular my book, is something that I'm very happy about. So thank you for that. As for me, I'm Marisa Silva, the lucky PM, as I'm known in the industry. I'm a project management consultant, a researcher, author, and speaker. So anything that has to do with project management, I'm interested. I think it's fair to say. And particularly if it relates to PMOs. So Ilinka, you were mentioning yesterday that we had the International PMO Day, and that was amazing. What a moment of celebration, of recognition of PMOs worldwide. It was fantastic to see and to be part of. So well done also to the PMO leader for encouraging and raising the profile of PMOs worldwide. As I was saying, then a consultant and interested in anything that relates to project management. I have been advising companies internationally on anything that relates to projects because pretty much I'm intrigued by them. How is it that we have so much knowledge available now from so many places with so many lessons from others, and still projects keep failing? I think that should be something like, well, is it that we are missing those lessons, that they are just documented but not effectively learned? What is it? So I'm intrigued, and that's a drive for me to keep studying about project management, to keep listening to other opinions on how they manage projects, etc. So on that study side, I also hold a master's degree in strategic management of projects, and I've attempted a PhD in project management. So I've done the classes part. I still need to do the thesis part, the difficult part of it. So we'll get there at some point. But yes, I would say that overall, I do like projects. That was also the reason for me to write a book about projects in 2016. So to try to make the terminology of projects more accessible to others who may have not been exposed to that domain, or even people that may want to just have a different perspective on topics that are sometimes hard coded in us without any critical judgment, without any evaluation. So by offering a different perspective on familiar concepts, relating them to metaphors, to stories, I'm hoping that I can bring new ideas on how problems that we'll face in our projects can then be solved. That book is Bedtime Stories for Project Managers. So it's not a bestseller yet, but I'm counting on with you all. On Amazon, also translated into several languages. It was first published in 2016, and I was amazed with the reaction of the public in general. People were contacting me on LinkedIn, emails, and so on, to ask me to translate the book into their languages, to make that available to other markets as well. So it was just a fascinating journey so far. So it's now published in Greek, in Arabic, in Italian, Mandarin. So astonishing, definitely.
Well,
And now,
it sounds like it's on definitely a good track to be a bestseller. It's global.
yes, it is global,
That's amazing.
indeed. Exactly. And I think that is due to its simplicity too. Everyone knows stories. Everyone was read or reads bedtime stories to their children or when they were kids. So the fact that it brings back those memories, those stories from the past that we are all familiar with, I think even if you don't get the project management part, which I still hope you do, at least you'll be surprised, you'll be comforted by rereading those stories. So it's not expecting you to make you sleep. In fact, the subtitle is "And Others with Trouble Sleeping." That is just ironic in a way. But hopefully it's going to keep everyone awake and providing you with thoughts on how to address some challenges, how to have a different way of thinking about those problems that you'll have in projects, being, for instance, projects that are approved without a strong business case, or when we have projects that are reported as as green, when in reality they are a bright red, that type of scenario that we have all seen, that we have all experienced before. So I think that explains the success of it. It's just 10 stories. It's a light reading. So as you can see, believe. But the fact that it is simple, I think that's what makes it relatable.
No, for sure, and I think you definitely hit a good point there that um, sometimes project management may sound cold and
Mhm.
difficult to associate with real life situations, which is strange because we as professionals go through so many studies and so many certifications and so many just to kind of get to the point where we're comfortable with all the
Mhm.
the terminology and the applicability. But I don't think we do too much. We don't have too much emphasis on the actual applicability of it,
Yes,
and
and
then we
indeed
hit roadblocks.
we have so many acronyms in project management. It's crazy. Like even
Yeah.
just the simple one, PMP. Is that project management professional? Is that project management plan? Is that something else? So even the same acronym can have so many meanings, like TBC, WBS, SAP. All of those that we use in business, not exclusive to project management. But I agree that sometimes look too cold, too distant for them to be actionable in a way that make us think about what is the reality of that situation. So making it more, um, bringing simplicity to that chaos, I think that's what I have attempted to do.
Yeah, sometimes we just have to keep it simple so we get
Definitely,
to the
definitely.
bottom of it.
Hmm. And
How
that,
did you go ahead,
sorry,
sorry.
go on.
I was just curious, how did you come up with the idea of the bedtime stories? Was it
Mhm.
were you very fond of bedtime stories yourself and
Mhm.
it was just a correlation, or
Well, I do like reading, first of all, and books in general. I do like stories. And then I had a haha moment when I was starting my career. So back in the days, about 15 years ago, when I started in project management consulting, I had three three intense months of mentoring on what is it to be a project management consultant, training as well. And as part of that process, I was shadowing one of our most senior colleagues, providing training in preparation for the PMP certification. And he made it in a very natural way. Was an expert in his field. He is an expert in his field. And when presenting the topic of scope management, and in particular how to deal with scope creep, he talked about the story of the stone soup, which I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with, but it's actually quite a well known story here in Portugal. It's a story of a traveler that just goes from village to village, is a poor traveler, and is asking for some ingredients to make a soup. And he knocks on the door, and people say, "Oh, sorry, I don't have anything to give you. You'll need to go to another place." And he tries, he keeps trying, and still no response, no positive response from anyone. And then he does something very crazy, perhaps, which is he finds a tiny pot. It goes to the center of the village, and it just has in that tiny pot water and a big stone that he puts there. And he says, "Oh, I'm going to do a brilliant stone soup. Who wants to join?" And people started to be very curious about what is this stone soup. I've never heard of this way of making soup with just a stone. How is that even possible? What can you get out of a stone? And because they were curious about it, they started approaching that traveler, and they started to ask, "Oh, maybe if we add some carrots, it would be even better." And then they would bring the carrots. Or someone would say, "I think I have some potatoes at home. Let me try with some potatoes too. I think this is going to taste even better." And then someone would bring, I don't know, salt, cabbages, other ingredients. At the end of the day, what happened was that what started as a simple water with a stone actually ended up being a very rich soup because everyone in the village contributed to make that soup. Now, how can this relate to scope management, you may ask? I think we see a lot of situations where people just add stuff into the project without any change control, without that being approved in the first place with the customer or even with also the sponsor of the project. So that lack of configuration management, that lack of agreement of what is the baseline, what are the exceptions, how we are going to manage those exceptions. I think it was something that at the time I thought this is a very good story to make a point. Because at the end of the day, of course, with formulas, with facts. Facts do tell something. They can tell us a trajectory, a trend, how we are evolving, what's wrong. But it's the stories that sell, that make the point, that allow us to then build other roots in our minds. So I think that from that moment on, I then just went on a search for other stories, because then all of a sudden, it's almost like, oh, this is relatable to this, and this can actually be a good idea to time management. So I then easily found 10 concepts that I wanted to explore further, like, for instance, around the importance of doing proper estimates or doing proper risk management. I used Red Riding Hood story for that one, for instance. Or if you are talking about the importance of having ethical project management in place and having proper quality assurance in your projects, a good example of that would be The Boy Who Cried Wolf, for instance. So just trying to find those ideas there that I could then relate to project management. But where it started, it was actually with that stone soup. And then the other ingredients were added, exactly like
And the nice part about it is that all these stories can also have different associations to it, right? So, in this case, for example, it was a good example for scope creep, but you could also think about it, for example, from a leadership perspective, that when that person was asking for ingredients, nobody was giving. So that was kind of like the managerial side. But when he actually took initiative and put the bowl there, and everybody kind of followed suit, that's more of a leadership type of I guess I don't know, just my mind
No,
went
no, that's
in different
absolutely right.
areas,
And
but
that was something that I then also found quite fascinating, which was when people started to translate the books, they were asking me, oh, have you also considered that perspective? Because this could also fit
yeah.
in that same story, exactly as you were saying, Linda. So I think that just shows that stories, they open imagination. They just open other perspectives that you may have not considered before. So they can also be used, if you are a good storyteller, they can be used to establish that case for change, to make a point, to convince someone that that was the right approach to take. So definitely different perspectives would be welcomed. And even nowadays, I have people in the book reviews or contacting me directly saying, oh, I think there's another story in my country that I think would be a good fit for another version, another edition of the book. So I'm welcoming them all.
It's an amazing idea. It's very unique, and yeah, very very it has a bit of a game in it, and that's nice. It plays with your inner child, and we all
Exactly.
know these stories. And I think it's sometimes it might be good to go back and look at them one more time and think about it more simple.
Yes,
So
in fact, I do. If you don't mind, I have in the very
no,
beginning
for
of the
sure.
book something that you remind me. It says, if you want your children to be intelligent, read them fairy tales. If you want them to be more intelligent, read them more fairy tales. So, as you were saying, it's just a matter of rereading, finding new perspectives. And it's
Yeah,
also
no, that's
something that, so as I mentioned, the book was first published in 2016, so a couple of years now. And I started that as a soul journey. So I was trying to find the stories, seeing what perspectives would be of more relevance in my own view, what could I add of value. But nowadays, if I were to do it again, I would probably do it as a collaborative project. Since this book, I then wrote a couple, well, not a couple, but one or two more. The latest one was actually here in Portugal, called Voices of Project Management in Portugal, where that was the collaborative work of about 20 authors coming together to share their perspectives. And having seen that, I think that brings a much more complete, holistic, agnostic even, and rich experience to the booking, the writing process, and then to the experience that the reader would get from it. So a lesson, perhaps, for a second version.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. Having even more perspective. Would you want to keep the same layout with bedtime stories, but
I would
just
say
have them
so,
from different
yes.
areas?
But exactly, maybe from different regions in the globe. I'm sure that there
Mm.
are stories that I'm not aware of that could be of much interest to. again, to establish a connection with project management. Although the challenges are global, despite of the region, the stories may add a significant or a different perspective to it.
How did you choose? You have 10, right? The book has 10 stories.
It has, yes, 10.
10 stories. How did you choose? What were the? Did you choose the main, I guess, pain points that you saw in your experience?
Yes, that was mainly around what I consider to be the key domains in project management. So, say for instance, risk management, stakeholder engagement, our traditional core project management areas. But then I also wanted to add something about the importance of tailoring your approach, and also about being ethical, which are two aspects that I think that should be more discussed. I think they are mentioned, of course, in all the nice guidelines out there, but I think that they are not as put in practice or challenged as they should be. Like, for instance, what does it mean to have an ethical approach to project management? Are you considering the sustainable goals in our projects? Are we only considering the triple constraint, or are you considering also what could be the impact on the local communities, or even on the sustainability of the business overall? Or if we look into the other topic that I was referring to, the tailoring of the approach. Of course, if you look into, I don't know, the Prince 2 guide or the PMI body of knowledge guide, they all reference tailoring, but how to do it in practice, that's where people struggle. So how to know how much is sufficient, what is proportionate, what is adequate to the scale, to the complexity of this project. Because if you are, I don't know, managing a project that is over 10 million and dollars and spanning over multiple years, probably it should require much more oversight, much more scrutiny than one that is something that we have done before, something that is of small complexity, small size, low complexity, that carries less risk. So knowing how to tailor the approach, the method as well, and going back to PMOs, how the PMOs can then advise on what would be the appropriate toolkit to use depending on that scale and the characteristics of the project. So in my book, that is covered on a story called "The Bed of Procrustes." So I'm not sure how to pronounce it correctly in English, but it's about. I think it's actually a Greek story. I can't recall now. I do have it here though, which has to do with the fact that you would then cut the legs or not of Procrustes so that it could fit in the bed. Or actually, the Procrustes would do that to whoever was going to visit so that they would fit. And sometimes that's what we do with our projects. We just force them to fit, not realizing that projects, they are all different. So it's us that need to adapt. And having that capability to adapt, I think that's definitely a power skill that all project managers should have. In the same way, telling stories, that's another good power skill to have. Because ultimately, when you're presenting the business case for your project, that's not just a financial case. You really need to convince people that that is the route to take and why would this add value to the business. Or if you are presenting a project plan, a Gantt chart, nowadays when people see a Gantt chart, their immediate reaction is just go away, just too complex. The task relationships, also the dependencies, cross dependencies are everywhere. But presenting in a way that is manageable, that is inviting, that presents us as a journey to be taken, a roadmap, that is also in a way telling a good story about the project. And of course, when you are managing your team, you also need to lead them, to influence them, to resolve conflicts, to negotiate. So that is all something that through stories you can you can mitigate those challenges, I would say, if not solve them fully.
Do you have anything that is covering the people skills or building the relationship component?
In a way, so I'm not sure if you are aware of how the structure of the book is, so but let me explain for everyone's benefit. So you have the story first of all, then how does that relate to project management? So what concepts would be translatable? And then I do have at the end the moral of the story, where I do present my own recommendations, lessons as well to be taken. So usually that's where I would introduce that topic of what to do, particularly around building those relationships and using the stakeholder management and managing those expectations as a power skill. So just looking into the list of stories, we have, for instance, the Emperor's New Clothes, which is a good example there of how you would be able to negotiate the fact that the clothes are not ready, that in fact the emperor has no clothes to show, and selling that idea of brilliant clothes that only intelligent people would see them. It's one that appeals to that people side, I would argue. Then also the Six Blind Man and the Elephant, that's another good example, or even the Old Man, the Boy and the Donkey, which tells us that no matter who is asking, people will have all different expectations. They would see it from different sides. They will have different interests at play. So you'll need to understand what is it that is of value to each, but it's impossible to please everyone. So it's about picking your battles wisely, I would say. But yes, I fundamentally
Sounds
think
amazing.
that project management, for me, it's about two things: making good decisions, although probably I'm presenting it as a simplistic thing, and then building relationships. So I've tried to convey that message throughout the several morals of the story available in the book, in the 10 stories. So this could be
No, that's
about
amazing.
building commitment when you are presenting a project. It could also be about trying to understand what is value, the perception of value that everyone has. Going back to the example of tailoring, and even in my work as a consultant, something that I always say is that needs to be co-created. So it's not something that you should read on a book, have this great idea, and then do that hard selling of try to convince everyone that this was the best idea ever. Instead, what you should do is actually be humble, knock on the door or on Teams or on Zoom, whatever that is, and then ask people, what is keeping you awake at night? How can I help? And then from there, build the toolkit that is going to be used, the method, that principle of proportionality that we were discussing before, for assurance, for what is the adequate level of controls in the project. So co-creation, that's a key word for me. I strongly believe that no one destroys what one helps to build. So if they're part of that journey, the better.
I feel that this book needs a movie.
That's a good idea, actually.
No,
Don't you
I
mean?
mean, some people react very well to visual. Me, one of them. Yeah,
Well,
you
I don't
can,
want to spoil the surprise, but there are conversations
ah,
in the background. Not a movie, but in that direction to make it more visual.
in that direction. Okay, well, that's great. That's great. I'm gonna shut up then to not spoil anything.
Well, it's still in the making, so I don't know when, but it's definitely something that it has been presented as something that people would like. So, and of course,
We don't really have too much visual. Sorry for interrupting. We don't really have in project management. We don't really have too much. We have many books, but we don't have too much of the visual.
I agree. And even
Not
in the books,
the.
they are all black and white, no pictures. So that was again something that I tried to change with this one. It's full of illustrations. So there's an illustration to represent each of the stories, and definitely having more videos in line with the times. I think would be something that would be of benefit to everyone. I agree. We should also
Do
refer that to the institutions, to the professional associations, as a suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, when PMI releases a PM book or a Prince or all of these, uh, Bibles of books, they could associate with it something
Sure.
like your
Make it
book,
more,
which is,
more digestible.
the lighter read,
Mhm.
so that things can go hand in hand. So there's definitely, the opportunities for collaborations if they're open to it. I'm not sure what their position is when it comes to this kind, because I assume that the reason why they focus more on the training on the formality perspective, and they do less on the training perspective, is because they know probably that there are many consultants out there who will then take the PMOs and the PMPs and
And
consult them, and
yes, and
yeah, yeah,
and simplify them.
which I
Yes,
think
that's my job
it's
as
a lot
well.
of work. Exactly. And you're tailoring yourself, I'm sure, for each client and their needs, whereas the big institutions wouldn't really have that capability. So they could do more hands-on type of, I think, more hands-on type of, I don't know, workshops.
Well, I'm sure that's a work of the full community, so everyone playing their part. But yes, I agree that that generic view that would come from the institutions would then need to be almost like translated into the reality of the different businesses and industries. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
definitely where consultants, trainers, and others would kick in.
would kick in. Do you use the book when you consult, when you have your client interactions? Do you give them homework? Do you do you use the book when as part
Well,
of their
sometimes
night?
I do mention some examples from the book. So, of course, I don't like to brag about the book. When I introduce myself, I usually do mention it, just as a reference, because I honestly believe it could be a good reading for people. So I did it not with the purpose of making money out of it. It probably just pays for my Netflix every month. That's it. But it's for expanding those concepts for people that maybe have an interest on project management, but they don't have, say, the funds to go on a proper training course yet, or to go through all the reading, the resources that are available online. So this would be a good introduction, I would say. So that was my main intent, to spread the word about what project management could be, and then, as I was saying before, to, if possible, provide that fresh perspective to others that may be more experienced. So in my consulting practice, yes, I do present some examples from the book, but it's something that is just mentioned as an example rather than forcing people to buy the book. That's not the case at all.
Oh, of course not. Of course not. No, I was thinking more, because, and that makes sense because you believe in all, and these stories helped you at some point and may help you in how you see project management. So the fact that
Exactly.
you put them in writing and you're using them as examples, that just means that you believe in what you wrote, and that they're
Exactly.
useful tools.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it also helps to decide what lens I'm going to use for this project. Is one that is more focused around risk management, and therefore, what is the story that would fit it better? Or is there one that where I can see that the key problems are around the relationship side, and therefore I would select a different type of story to present. So yes, that does help to build that case for change by introducing those simple concepts that we can gain from
Did
stories.
When you were putting together the book, did anybody, I'm assuming, I'm not sure if anybody else knew that you were working on it. Did anybody, or did you reach out to anybody for for stories, or was it just you?
No, no, I did almost like a validation of the approach. So exactly as I would suggest doing in any project, to have that sort of independent eyes, project assurance. So in my case, I consulted a close friend of mine who I much respect as a project management professional, and I also liaised with that senior trainer that I mentioned in the beginning, who gave the idea of the stone soup, just to inquire if he thought that this would be a good way of passing the message. So I did share
Hmm.
some ideas with him as well at the time. But it was a close group, yes.
Hmm.
And if
Do
you
you
don't
have a
mind,
favorite story? No,
sorry.
go for it. Go
Yes, I
ahead.
was actually going to refer to my favorite story. So we are in sync, Ilinka. So that is the Paris New Clothes, because you were asking before if I use any of the stories as in consulting. One that I do use a lot and see happening a lot, unfortunately, relates to the Emperor's New Clothes. So that is the story about the emperor king, that he was crazy about clothes, about fashion. He always wanted to have the most brilliant, the most trendy clothes available in all the kingdoms around him. So he always had the most exclusive clothes for him. And then, knowing this, there were two people who were scammers, so kind of burglars, imposters, that approached him and said, "Oh, we have this amazing set of clothes. They are the most special clothes ever. Would you like us to do the clothes for you?" And yes, of course, the emperor immediately said so. So they would pay in advance, or they would have been paid in advance, and then the emperor would ask for progress week after week, and they say, "Oh, those clothes are so special. We need more time. We need more money. We need to purchase those fabrics from exclusive places, whatever that is." So always adding more funding to that project and delaying that expectation of the go live date, if you want to see it like that. So after some time, the emperor was getting quite upset because he was not seeing anything. And then finally, the imposters said, "It's ready. Let's have the trial. So it's all over there. Please go ahead and try it for yourself. I'm sure you'll be amazed by it." And of course, the emperor went there, but there was nothing there to try on. So he was quite surprised, even amazed, like, "What's going on? I can't see anything." And then they would say, "Oh, but I mentioned that our clothes are very special. They can only be seen by people that are very bright, very intelligent." And then, of course, the emperor didn't want to admit that he was not seeing any clothes at all, because that would make him seem like stupid, dumb. So it's, okay, I can see them now. They are amazing, the most beautiful clothes ever. And it just proceeds to pretend that he was seeing something, that he was wearing something, although in reality, he was simply naked there. And then he did a parade to show to everyone his new clothes, as usual. When it was, I think, a special celebration, so New Year's or something. So he did this parade through the kingdom, and people were just amazed in the same way to see that the king was naked. But then the rumors start spreading that only clever people would be able to see the clothes. And again, everyone was shut up, not admitting that they were not seeing anything at all. Until then, a little boy in the crowd said, "Ha ha ha, the king, the emperor is naked. Can't you all see it?" Until then, everyone realized that, yes, that was just a scam. And in fact, the emperor was fully naked, no clothes at all. That was not a magical trick involved. And unfortunately, I do see this with our projects all the time, which is pet projects. If you have the CEO sponsoring a project, will you be brave enough to say that that project is not worthwhile doing? Or would you, even though the project is naked, it doesn't have a strong, a solid business case, what happens is that still sometimes the project proceeds because it was sponsored by the CEO, because it is a pet project. Or we can also have situations where it's just a matter of perhaps being too human. The business case, it doesn't add up, but we are optimistic by nature. We believe that this project is going to deliver a huge amount of benefits. It's going to realize those financial benefits. It's going to cost less. It's going to take less time than intended, etc. So of course we do it because we are just optimistic. So there's that bias that we can also have in not realizing that the project is naked. But very often we still see that the project is not worthwhile doing, but there are other aspects that limit us, our approach to stop that project. Political influences, those pet projects that I was referring to, strategic misrepresentation as well, just presenting this project as strategic, as compliance, as simple to do, when in reality you do know that it's not strategic at all, just giving it a name so that it's going to be approved. So that's just lying. So are we being ethical by allowing that project to still proceed? That's the question that we should be asking. if we have a project that we can see that is naked, are we brave enough to say that it's naked? So I think it helps to at least make the point that we need to be much more ethical in our approach on how we are addressing the business cases of our projects, and also being more mindful of the biases that we all experience just because we are human at the end of the day. But yes, that's my favorite story of them all.
That's a good story. I think that we probably all need that little boy sometimes
Yes,
around us
exactly, exactly.
to
So
break the ice.
yeah, it's about having that project assurance in place, having that environment also that supports that honesty, that transparency. Like, of course, it may be the CEO that has this good idea, but if that CEO itself has created an environment where people are feeling comfortable in presenting a project as read, in challenging a project, in saying that that's a better place where those resources can be used, I think that's in everyone's benefit. So, in project management as a community, I think that sometimes we are too focused on the delivery side, on the management of projects, but we should also be more concerned with the management for projects. So creating that environment for the projects to succeed. And that involves having sponsorship, strong, committed, available sponsorship in place, having PMOs and other functions that can support the project. It's not just about having the right delivery method. Overall, I just think people spend too much unnecessary time discussing waterfall versus agile, just to give an example. That's not what matters.
Yeah.
But
You whatever you want to call it, as long as it works, you can use it.
exactly. Yes, that's my philosophy in my professional life. Whatever works. I'm a big fan of project management bricolage. I don't care if it's a little bit of this method, a little bit of this tool, as long as they all fit together, as long as they give me what I need at the end, that they are appropriate to what are the characteristics of the project, that people feel comfortable in using them, fine. Of course, we all need to have some boundaries in place so that we have sufficient governance and some standardization as well. So it's not just improvising all the time, but we need to be more flexible. So having those boundaries in which people can operate, but ultimately working project management, we are all grown ups. We know what's available. So then let us decide what works best within those boundaries that we all need to meet. So yes,
Of course,
definitely.
I guess some organizations are probably more difficult to to navigate through, especially the bigger ones who have already some. And especially I think it's also I think a matter of timing, as a project manager, when you are dropped in a project,
Mhm.
because I can't say it otherwise. It happened to me in many cases, in the healthcare space, where I was just the project was already ongoing, and I was just kind of dropped in the middle of the action. And even if I thought of doing some form of audit for myself to see what happened so far, where are we going, and some things didn't necessarily look right, and it might have
Mhm.
made more sense to just stop it. The business decision was not necessarily, or maybe I didn't know how to express it better, because I think that's also something you mentioned earlier about us not knowing sometimes how to actually convince and tell our story, which is a really important thing, because we can be so brilliant in what we do, but if we don't know how to transfer that message to others,
Yes,
it
it's not
doesn't
just
really
the
matter.
fact, it's the story that you need to tell to convince people, definitely. And stopping projects when that's I mentioned the importance of ethics before, and that's a simple example. For me, not stopping a project where we do know collectively as a company that that project is not going to realize the benefits that it was intended to. It's not achievable anymore. And still, we decide to go ahead, wasting resources financially, people as well, that would be better used in a more feasible, achievable project. In a way, that's being unethical. But we are sometimes also not forced, but constrained by that environment that I was referring to before. So that's where I'm saying that we need to create the conditions overall for the projects to succeed, and then let the project managers do their part, and others, of course, like PMOs and other functions. But creating that environment for me is key, that pre-project stage, if you want to see it. So ensuring that there is a strong justification for the project, ensuring that we have a scenario where if people are uncomfortable with something, that can simply go and ask for help, and that they are not going to be seen as reflecting on their own performance, but as something that is of benefit to everyone, to present that problem as early as possible in the life of the project, because that's the only way that we know that we're going to avoid it later, to solve it. So having that scenario where we do have the fallacy of the sunk costs. We have spent so much time, so much money. Why stop it now? Well, because there's a missed opportunity over there. There's an opportunity cost that is not being considered. So it's about including those perspectives too. And it does take courage. It does take that environment to exist. And it does take that perspective on ethics too, I'd say.
And knowing how to point out these things, even to to your different stakeholders. When you're talking to a CEO, for example, and that CEO is very convinced that a project is worthwhile, but you are not, probably the best way to address it is to show him or her the things that he or she actually thinks about and needs to know. So that's again back to the storytelling and your audience for it,
Definitely
I
gaining support
guess.
from others to tell that story as well. Sometimes it can be a matter of lack of accountability too. Like, what happens if I waste those resources? There's no consequences. What do I care if the benefits are not realized? I'm going to leave this company in 1 year. So that view
Yeah, it
of
can be
not
a
being
personal.
sustainable, thinking long term, what would be the impact that that decision will create? I think that's what sometimes is missing. And then, of course, we have functions internally that can help. PMOs or assurance as a specific function or within the context of the PMO can provide that independent view on why this project should put on hold, or how many, I don't know, millions of dollars are at risk if we still decide to proceed. So stories are important, but sometimes people will also care about the money. So it's one thing saying that we have this very critical three risks, and saying there are £1 million or $1 million at risk if we proceed. So people would value different things. It's about understanding how to pass that message in a way that will land as effectively as possible. So the
Yeah,
content
that's a good
goes.
point. That's a good point. Um, yeah. You mentioned at the beginning, and I actually wanted to ask you: is there anything else that you wait for? Let me take this way. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Any other stories that you wanted to talk about?
Uh, no, I think I've covered the key ones for me. I'm happy to talk about
Okay.
others if you need, but I would say that those are the key ones for me.
Well, good. Let's make the audience intrigued enough. I think they're intrigued enough so that they can go ahead and get the book. And
Good point.
sometimes I wonder if CEOs and other functions like those are actually having conversations like we're having now about them. Are they also having these conversations about how to better assist project managers in their day-to-day job? They
Yes,
should read their book, if not.
yes, that's where it should start. You have that model called the pyramid of ignorance, where the ones at the top are ignorant of what's going on in the field. So it's also a responsibility of the ones that can bridge that gap. And again, I'm thinking of PMOs because they are very close to my heart, but they are in a privileged position to help in setting the strategy, and then also helping to drive to deliver that strategy on projects. So even though the PM sometimes may not have that direct access to whoever is making the decisions, I'm sure that there are ways of influencing for those decisions to be made. Often we do think about the organizational culture as something that we are forced upon, that we are just limited by, but that culture It's us every day, on the day to day, in our operations, on our ways of working, the relationships that we build with others. That's how culture is created and how it can be influenced. So if we're unhappy with the culture that we have, let's start talking more about it rather
Mm-hmm.
than just hoping for something to change.
Yep. And I think now, especially with everything becoming multicultural, I think that the goods and the bad that each is bringing into, on the table is probably making organizations more adaptable to
Mhm.
just having being more flexible when it comes to culture in general.
I agree. Mhm. Yes, and for instance, personally, I do work with several cultures. I'm from a different culture than the company I work for instance.
Mhm.
So being aware of what those differences are and being welcoming, understanding what they are, and seeing them as actually strengths rather than weaknesses, I think makes a difference on how we all work with each other for the better.
Yep, and hopefully they're open to adapting to
Mhm.
um, to better suit their people's needs and not the other way around. I hope there's not too many out there who are um, who are like the Procust with the bed.
Yes, just checking where needed.
Yeah, no more feet cut. Hopefully, we're just making longer beds.
Exactly.
uh, why do you refer to yourself as the lucky PM?
The question.
The
Um,
question.
well, there are several reasons. For me, a big one is that I think that people just ignore the role of luck. Of course, I consider myself to be very professional in what I do and always try the best in my approach. But there's also an element of luck, being in the right place with the right people, with the right team, being given lucky projects as well. So that's leaving it to chance sometimes. Well, or benefiting from chance, not leaving it to chance. Because we are project managers, we don't leave things to chance. We just control as much as possible. That's one. And by the way, I was being sarcastic on this one. I actually think that we need to let go a bit more and being a bit more flexible. I don't want to advocate for a full laissez-faire attitude, but at the same time, that's something that PMOs in particular are very criticized for being too controlling. Let's actually just relax a bit more overall. But yes, that is one of the reasons for it. The other one has to do with the fact that in my career so far, I do really consider myself very lucky. Like, for instance, the fact that when I started my career, I was introduced intensively to what is good project management with people that I consider to be best in their field here in Portugal. And then, of course, transitioning to other industries, to other companies, even then, and even now, I consider to be amongst the best. So I'm really fortunate in that sense. Then another key reason is that there's this saying that goes, there are no lucky project managers. No, there are no good project managers, only lucky ones. The more you plan, the luckier you get. So again, emphasizing that need for planning all the time. So of course, planning is always more important than the plan. So having that art of planning and discussing with the team, I think, is what makes the trick in being successful or not. And that communication is definitely something that I try to encourage within the teams that I work with. And the final and perhaps less or more obvious reason is that the lazy project manager was already taken. So between lazy, I decided for lucky.
So Peter got
Exactly,
Peter
got there
got in there
first.
quicker.
Exactly, because I'm lazy as well, but not as him.
I was hearing that this is what we're aiming to get to the point where we're so efficient that we just feel lazy.
Exactly,
And
exactly.
no,
That's what I am.
that's the goal.
That's exactly it.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that, Marisa. I think it's a great well, I guess nickname if you're using it as a nickname or in any circumstance. We are very lucky to have had a bit of you today and to have
Thank you.
access to that amazing book. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, just search for the Lucky PM. So they can go to the luckypm.com. That's where I have other books as well that I've written, just some references to things that I usually speak about. How can I help others? And then LinkedIn. So just search for the Lucky PM. I'm easy to find.
Oh, okay. LuckyPM.com. Wonderful. Is there anything else that you want to say in closing? We have a few more
Just
minutes.
wishing everyone lucky projects. So I hope that that the talk that we had today that has inspired you to go and read some more fairy tale stories. They don't need to go from the book. You can find your own and try to relate them to project management. But if you are out of imagination, this is a good start, I'd say. And thank you also for the PMO leader and to the book club for having me.
Oh,
I
thank
am the
you.
lucky one.
It was a and I will probably take that back, and we are the lucky ones. Although it's your nickname, we're not stealing that one. We're just really appreciative of your time, and thank you for being here. And then for everybody else, we have so this is a wrap for today, but our next episode 16 will be in about a month. We have a special guest there as well, and we will be talking about personal development in consulting. So if anybody is interested, go check it out. We will announce it on LinkedIn once the registrations are open. And for the event of today, the recording, you will see it right away popping up on our YouTube channel, on the PMO Leaders YouTube channel. So go ahead and take it. I didn't mention, but people who are not members of the PMO Leader won't be able to access the recording. FYI, the membership is free. So if you're not a member of the PMO Leader, just go ahead and register, and then you can access not just this webinar, but so many more other cool tools that we have there for you. So, and we appreciate you, the audience for whom we're making these shows, and we're continuing to make them, and also the PMO Leader for their support, and our extremely wonderful guests like Marisa today. It was great. It was a great episode. Thank you, Marisa, once again, and thank you everybody else. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you next time.
Thank you all. Bye and lucky projects.
Bye bye. Lucky projects.